All right, we just heard from House GOP leader, excuse me, Kevin McCarthy on the budget situation. It passed the House this continuing resolution, which funds the government for another week. It's over in the Senate, but there's a bigger issue here. Will the Republicans acquiesce to the demands of Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and give Democrats, many of whom are on their way out, the ability to set the spending priorities for next year? They had a whole year to do this, and they didn't do it. And as has been pointed out, they're cobbling this together at the last moment, circumventing the entire process. None of this is being publicly vetted. In fact, the senators and the congressmen that are going to be voting on this will have essentially just moments to read through this bill before they have to vote on it, as it's jammed up against Christmas. Joining me now to discuss this and more, Senator Mike Lee. He serves on 5 Senate committees, including the Joint Economic Committee. He represents the state of Utah, and he's been leading the charge over in the House to draw the line on this radical spending spree that the Democrats have been on. Senator Lee, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thank you, Tony. Good to be with you.
So I know you have been on the floor today. It's a busy day. This is all unfolding. What's the latest?
The latest is that they're trying to push through this House-passed continuing resolution that would keep the federal government funded for another 7 days. What I'm proposing is that before we vote on that, we vote on my amendment to that, which would extend out the short-term spending mechanism of this House-passed bill, take it out several weeks. I think we should take it to March 10th so that we have no risk of a shutdown between now and March 10th. Now, if Congress at any point, whether it's next week or a month or so from now, if Congress wants to pass an omnibus, it may still do so. But what my amendment would allow us to do is to have that conversation in a level-headed, clear-headed way, unencumbered by the twin threat of either shutting down the government or forcing senators and congressmen to work through Christmas.
Well, as you know, this can be stopped by Republicans.
Yes.
They cannot do this. They, being the Democrats, cannot do this without Republican support. Are your colleagues with you?
Need us. That's right. Senate Democrats need us. They can't pass this without Senate Republicans. At least 10 Senate Republicans have to join with the Democrats in order to pass the omnibus. So my point is that given the fact that they need us, they need our votes, given the fact that we've just had a Republican House elected in the election, given that since 1954, we've seen control of the House shift from one party to another on only 5 occasions, and that in each of those occasions after that election, Congress did not pass one-size-fits-all comprehensive spending bill for the coming Congress. We shouldn't do that here. The best way to take the next step toward doing that is to take off the shutdown threat. You see, this is by design, Tony. For years, I've seen this. I've been in the Senate now 12 years, and they do this with some regularity. They'll force, through an artificial contrivance of their own, they'll force us into a position where the government's set to shut down just before Christmas. In this case, the day before Christmas Eve, if their 7-day bill passes. And then members get tossed an omnibus bill, a one-size-fits-all spending package that I predict will be about 3,000 pages long. I predict it'll have about 7,500 earmarks in it. And they'll have literally hours to review that. It's not enough time for the public to be able to inspect it, not enough time for individual members to identify flaws and make necessary changes. So what I'm saying is this, whether you're for this omnibus or not, you shouldn't be for it because it doesn't yet exist and nobody's seen it. But even if you are, you should support the Lee Amendment to the continuing resolution, because the Lee Amendment would take off the threat of a shutdown.
So when will there be a vote on your amendment?
I expect that we'll be voting on my amendment sometime tonight. Okay. And I really think all Republicans and many Democrats should vote for it. Whether they will remains to be seen.
All right, folks, 202-224-3121, the Senate switchboard. You can just tell them what state if you don't know your senators, just what state you're from, and they can connect you with the office. This is reasonable. This is very reasonable, taking this threat, and I've seen it many times myself, up against the wall, into the year, forcing them to take this or shut down the government. This is a smart approach, taking it off the table. We've been talking process, Senator Lee, but there's more here that we're concerned about, that you're concerned about, than just process. This process stinks, but the contents does as well. I mean, I was just talking with Kevin McCarthy about this. Since 2008 in the banking collapse, the housing issue, all that took place back in 2008, we've seen government debt go from about $9 trillion to $31 trillion just in that short period of time. We've got to change what we're doing.
Indeed we do, Tony, because if we don't do it, this will become, I believe it already is, the greatest single threat to our national security, especially as interest rates are on the rise. We're going to start to see the cost of that debt increasing exponentially. It's going to get really, really ugly. You know, last year, I think we spent about $400 billion on interest on our national debt. That's quickly going to rise above that to 5, 6, then 700 billion. Before long, it's entirely plausible, Tony, that within 2 or 3 years, we could see our annual interest payment on our national debt as a country soar to well over $1 trillion. And that's eclipsing every other single expense that we've got. This is serious, and this is not a good time for us to be continuing to spend money well in excess of what we're bringing in. You know, we're on track, if they pass this, to spend about $6 trillion this year. Prior to the pandemic, we were spending just over $4 trillion a year. And yet our government then, it's not like the government didn't exist or that it was underfunded. We were spending too much then too. But if we just stuck to what we were spending then and didn't increase it, tax revenues would be almost enough to bring us to balance by that point. We can do this. We've just got to get off of this nonsensical assumption that we can continue to have these astronomically high annual deficits.
With the interest rates rising, as well as the deficits increasing, I mean, we could be at a point where we're having to borrow money just to pay the interest on the money that we've borrowed. At that point, we're insolvent. Senator, we're out of time. I want to thank you for leading the charge over here, and we're going to encourage our folks to call in and encourage their senators to stand with you on this reasonable approach.
Thank you very much, Tony.
Merry Christmas to you.
Merry Christmas.